I remember that night like it was yesterday. The lights were bright. The music was soft. And my brother Daniel was walking toward me with the biggest smile I had ever seen on his face. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives you right before they destroy you. In front of everyone, he put his arm around me like we were the closest people in the world. And then he turned to his boss and laughed. "Oh, this is Alice. She's the family's failure. We don't really talk about her much." The room went quiet. I felt something crack inside my chest. But I didn't break. I didn't cry. I just smiled slowly and leaned in close to his ear. "You have no idea what's coming." I didn't always feel this way about Daniel. There was a time, a long time, when I looked up to him more than anyone else in my life. He was my older brother. He was loud and funny and confident. When he walked into a room, people noticed him, and I was just quiet little Alice sitting in the corner with a book, hoping that one day someone would notice me too. Growing up, our house was never really equal. Daniel was the golden child. My parents praised him for everything. When he got good grades, they celebrated. When he won something at school, the whole family gathered around him. And when I did something good, it was like it never happened at all. Like I wasn't even there. But I didn't resent him back then. I loved him. I truly loved him. Because he was my big brother, and I believed that he loved me too. I used to follow him around the house when I was little. I used to listen to every single word he said like it was the most important thing in the world. If Daniel said something was cool, I thought it was cool. If he said something was stupid, I stayed away from it. He shaped the way I saw everything, and I didn't even know it. As I got older, I started to notice small things. Things I tried so hard to ignore. Like the way he would laugh at my dreams instead of encouraging them. The way he would change the subject whenever I talked about something I was proud of. The way he always found a way to make every moment about himself. But I pushed it down every single time. Because he was my brother. And I wanted so badly to believe that he was on my side. Then one evening, when I was 22 years old, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I trusted him with the one thing that mattered most to me. I told him about my dream of becoming a writer. I sat next to him on the couch. Nervous and excited at the same time, I told him about the stories in my head, the words I wanted to put on paper, the book I wanted to write one day, and Daniel. He smiled. He looked at me and he smiled and he said, "That's great, Alice. I think you should go for it." In that moment, I felt seen. For the very first time in my life, I felt like someone in my family actually believed in me. But what I didn't know was that Daniel had already started telling our parents something very different behind closed doors. He was telling them that my dreams were childish, that I was wasting my life, that I would never amount to anything. He smiled at me, and he lied to everyone else. And that is where this story really begins. I worked so hard and nobody saw it for 2 whole years. I poured everything I had into my writing. Every morning before work, I would sit at my small kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and write. Every night after my shift ended and my body was tired, I would open my laptop and write again. I skipped nights out with friends. I gave up weekends. I saved every extra dollar I earned. Not for clothes or trips, but for the future I was building quietly all by myself. And during those 2 years, not one person in my family ever asked me how it was going. Not my mother. Not my father, and especially not Daniel. But I kept going, because the words on that page were the only place in the world where I felt like I mattered, where I wasn't the quiet one, where I wasn't invisible. I was building something real, something that was entirely mine. And even if no one around me saw it, I saw it. And for a while, that was enough. Then Daniel called me one evening in October. He told me he had a company dinner coming up, a big one. His boss, a man named Richard Hale, would be there along with a lot of important people from the industry. Daniel said it would be a great chance for me to network. He told me to wear something nice. He sounded warm, almost excited for me, and I believed him. I spent 3 days picking out what to wear. I even practiced how to introduce myself. I wanted to make a good impression, not just for Daniel, but for myself, because I thought, maybe this was my moment. Maybe my brother was finally ready to show the world that his little sister was someone worth knowing. The night of the dinner arrived, and I walked into that room feeling hopeful. The chandeliers were glowing. The music was calm and elegant. I felt like maybe, just maybe, things were finally going to be different between us. I spotted Daniel near the bar, talking to a tall man in a dark suit. That was Mr. Hale. Daniel saw me coming, and his face changed. Not in a way that showed pride, in a way that showed something else. Something I couldn't name at first, but I pushed the feeling away. I told myself I was imagining things. I walked up to them and smiled. And then Daniel put his arm round my shoulder like we were the happiest siblings in the room. He turned to Mr. Hale and laughed. Actually laughed. And the words came out of his mouth so casually, so effortlessly, like they meant nothing to him at all. This is Alice. She's the family's failure. We don't really talk about her much. Few people nearby turned their heads. Someone let out an awkward laugh, and Mr. Hale smiled politely, not knowing what to say. But me, I stood there frozen, not on the outside. On the outside, I was perfectly still, perfectly calm. But inside, something broke open. Something that had been holding together for years just shattered. I looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and in that moment, I saw him clearly for the first time. He wasn't my brother who believed in me. He was never that person. He was someone who needed me small so he could feel big. And I made a decision right there, in that bright, loud, beautiful room full of strangers. I was never going to be small again. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every single moment. The way Daniel smiled. The way the room shifted. The way his voice sounded so light, so casual, while he was ripping something out of me that I could never put back. And the worst part, it wasn't just anger I felt. It was shame. Because even after everything he did, a small, broken part of me still wished he had meant it differently. Still wished that somehow I had misunderstood. That maybe it was just a joke. That maybe he didn't really see me that way. But I knew the truth. I had always known it. I just wasn't ready to accept it until that night. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The tears were gone. The shaking was gone. What was left was something I had never felt before. It was cold. It was quiet. And it was sharp. It wasn't hatred. It was clarity. For the first time in my life, I could see Daniel exactly as he was. And I could see myself exactly as I was too. Someone who had spent years cute shrinking herself to make room for a man who never deserved that space. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I wrote my stories every morning. But this time, I didn't open my manuscript. I opened a fresh notebook, and I began to write something different, something careful, something with purpose, a plan, not a revenge plan filled with anger. No, this was something much more controlled than that. I wrote down everything I knew about Daniel, every lie he had ever told, every time he had taken something from me, every moment he had made me feel worthless. I wrote it all down slowly, like I was organizing the pieces of a puzzle I had been staring at my whole life without ever seeing the full picture. And then started to look closer at his professional life. It started small. I followed his company's social media. I read the posts he shared online about his sales numbers and his achievements. And something felt off. The numbers he talked about publicly didn't match what I had seen on a document he left open on his laptop one evening at our parents' house months ago. At the time, I thought nothing of it. I wasn't looking for anything, but now I was paying attention. So I kept looking. I didn't confront Daniel. I didn't call him. I didn't send him a single angry message. I let him believe that everything was normal between us. When he texted me the next day asking if I got home safe that night, I texted back and said yes. I even added a smiley face, because I had learned something important about people like Daniel. They never suspect the quiet ones. They never believe that the person they have spent years looking down on is capable of anything powerful. And that was his biggest mistake. Around that same time, I called Emma. Emma was my closest friend from college. We had lost touch a little over the years, but she was one of the few people in my life who had always seen me. Really seen me? She was a journalist. A sharp, honest, fearless journalist who wrote for a local business publication. And I trusted her more than almost anyone. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. I just told her that I had a feeling something wasn't right at Daniel's company. I asked her carefully if she could keep her eyes open. If she noticed anything unusual in public records or company reports. I wanted to know. Emma didn't hesitate. She said, "Alice, if something is wrong, we will find it." And I knew then I wasn't alone anymore. Every night after that, I would sit at my kitchen table long after the rest of the world had gone to sleep. And I would write. Not my novel, not yet. I would write down every small detail I discovered. Every inconsistency. Every thread that didn't quite connect the way it should. I was patient. I was careful. And I was building something my brother never thought. I was capable of building. Because Daniel had spent his whole life believing I was the family's failure. And he had no idea that I was about to prove him wrong in the most painful way possible. 3 weeks passed, and every single day felt like walking on glass, not because I was scared, but because waiting is its own kind of torture. Every time my phone buzzed, every time Daniel's name appeared on my screen with a casual message or a stupid meme, I had to pretend, I had to smile. I had to be the same quiet Alice he had always underestimated. And honestly, that was the hardest part. Not the planning, not the research, the acting. Pretending that nothing inside me had changed while everything inside me was on fire. Daniel called me one evening, about 2 weeks into my plan. He wanted to grab coffee. Just the two of us. And when I said yes, my hands were shaking under the table the entire time. He talked about his job, his apartment, some girl he was seeing. He didn't ask me a single question about my life. Not one. And I sat there, holding my coffee cup, nodding, smiling, saying the right things at the right moments. Playing a role I had been playing my entire life. But this time, I was playing it on purpose. Then one Thursday night, Emma called me. I was sitting on my couch wrapped in a blanket, pretending to read a book, but actually staring at the same page for 20 minutes. When her name lit up my screen, my heart jumped. I answered before the first ring even finished. "Alice," she said. And her voice was different, serious, careful. "Found something." She told me she had been going through public company records. The kind of boring financial documents that most people never bother to read. But Emma reads everything. And she found a pattern. Small adjustments in quarterly reports. Numbers that had been slightly shifted. Not enough to scream fraud on their own, but enough when placed side by side with what I had already discovered on Daniel's laptop, to paint a picture that was impossible to ignore. Daniel had been inflating his sales numbers quietly, consistently. For months, I sat there in silence for a long time after she finished talking. Emma asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. But I wasn't fine, because in that moment, 2 things hit me at the same time. The first was relief, because I finally had proof. Real, undeniable proof that the man who had called me the family's failure was living a lie of his own. And the second thing was grief, because somewhere deep inside me, a small part of me had still been hoping that Daniel wasn't really that kind of person. That maybe the dinner party was just one bad night. One cruel moment. That underneath all of it, my brother still had some good in him. But now I knew the truth. Daniel wasn't just careless. He wasn't just thoughtless. He was someone who cheated, who lied, who built his entire reputation on something fake. While I had spent years struggling, saving, bleeding for every single word I wrote, he had been taking shortcuts and letting other people believe he deserved everything he had. That night, I cried again. But these tears were different. They weren't tears of shame or embarrassment. They were tears of mourning. Because the brother I had loved as a little girl, the one I used to follow around the house, the one I had shared my deepest dream with, he had never really existed. He was just another version of the lie Daniel told himself every single day. I wiped my face. I took a breath. And I opened my notebook. Now I had everything I needed. The question was no longer whether I could do this. The question was when. And how. Because I didn't want to just expose Daniel. Anyone could do that. Send an email. Make a phone call. Watch his world fall apart from a safe distance. No. I wanted him to feel exactly what I felt that night at the dinner party. I wanted him to be seen, truly seen, in front of the people who mattered most to him, the people whose respect he had spent his entire life chasing. I wanted him to stand in a room full of people he was trying to impress and feel the ground disappear beneath his feet, just like I did. And then I remembered something. Daniel had mentioned a few weeks ago that his company was hosting a big quarterly awards dinner. A celebration. Mr. Hale would be there. The top executives, the people Daniel spent every waking moment trying to impress. It was the perfect stage. But first, I needed to get myself a seat at that table. And I already had an idea exactly how to do it. The night of the awards, dinner arrived faster than I expected. And the strange thing is, I wasn't nervous. I thought I would be. I had imagined this moment 100 times in my head. I had pictured myself shaking. I had pictured myself second-guessing everything, walking into that room and suddenly forgetting why I came. But none of that happened. Instead, I felt something I had never felt before in my entire life. I felt ready. Getting my seat at that table had taken more courage than I ever thought I had. 2 weeks before the dinner, had called Mr. Hale's assistant directly. I introduced myself not as Daniel's sister, not as anyone connected to the company. I introduced myself as Alice, a freelance writer working on a feature piece about successful local businesses for a regional magazine. Emma had helped me set that up. She had connections at the publication and she vouched for me. The assistant, impressed by how professional I sounded, set up a brief meeting with Mr. Hale himself. I sat across from that man in his sleek office and I smiled and I shook his hand and I pitched my story. And the whole time, my brother's name was sitting right there on the tip of my tongue. But I didn't say it, not once, because I didn't need to. I just needed to be in that room. And now I was. The evening started beautifully. I walked into the venue wearing the exact same dress I had worn the first time. The same simple, elegant dress I wore the night Daniel humiliated me in front of strangers. I chose it on purpose, because I wanted to walk into that room as the same Alice who had walked in before. The same quiet girl. The same invisible sister. Only this time, I was anything but invisible. I spotted Daniel almost immediately. He was near the bar, laughing too loudly, holding a glass of wine like it was a trophy. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man who believed the whole world was built just for him. And then his eyes found me across the room. He stopped laughing. His face didn't change all at once. It was subtle, a flicker, a tightening around his jaw. His fingers gripped the glass just a little tighter. And I watched all of it happen in slow motion, because I was watching him see me. And for the first time, he didn't see his quiet little sister. He saw something he couldn't quite understand, something that made him uncomfortable, something that scared him, even if he didn't know why yet. He walked over to me, quickly, quietly. The confident smile was back, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Alice," he said, leaning in close so no one else could hear. "What are you doing here?" I looked at him, calm, steady, and I said, "I'm here as a guest, Daniel. I'm writing a feature on the company." He blinked. Something shifted behind his eyes. A flash of panic he tried so hard to hide. But I saw it. I saw everything. That's great," he said. But his voice cracked. Just slightly, just enough. The dinner continued. Food was served. Speeches were made. And I sat at my table near the front, watching Daniel across the room try to act normal. Watching him laugh at jokes that weren't funny. Watching him check his phone under the table every few minutes. Watching him glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking. He was terrified. And he didn't even know why yet. Then Mr. Hale took the stage. The room quieted. Everyone turned their attention to the front. Daniel straightened in his chair, smoothing his jacket, preparing himself for what he assumed was going to be his moment. His award. His recognition. The thing he had been working toward all year. Mr. Hale smiled warmly at the crowd. He thanked everyone for coming. He talked about the company's growth. And then he paused. He turned his gaze slowly toward my table. And he nodded at me. A quiet, sincere nod. Like he was acknowledging something important. Something real. Before we begin tonight's awards, Mr. Hale said, his voice calm and measured, I want to take a moment to thank someone. Someone who brought something very important to my attention recently. Someone who showed integrity. When it would have been much easier to stay silent. He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. Because the entire room followed his gaze. And every single pair of eyes landed on me, including Daniel's. I didn't look away from him. Not for a single second. And then I watched the color drain from his face, slowly, like someone had pulled a plug somewhere deep inside him. His mouth opened slightly. His hands resting on the table began to tremble. And in that moment, he understood everything all at once. I didn't smile. I didn't smirk. I didn't celebrate. I just held his gaze, steady, quiet, and I nodded once, slowly, and mouthed to words that only he could read on my lips. Now you know. Daniel stood up from his chair. His legs looked unsteady. The whole room was watching, but no one understood what was happening except the two of us. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. And for the first time in his life, my brother had absolutely nothing to say. The days after that night were the quietest of my life. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels like rest. It was heavy quiet. The kind that settles into your bones when something big has happened and the world around you hasn't caught up yet. Like standing in a room after a storm has passed and realizing the damage is already done. You can't take it back. You can't undo it. You can only stand there and breathe. Daniel didn't call me the next morning or the morning after that, and honestly, that silence hurt more than I expected it to. I woke up on the first day feeling like I had won something. But by the second day, that feeling started to fade. And what replaced it wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't pride. It was something much heavier. Something I wasn't prepared for. Because somewhere between planning everything and watching it unfold, I had forgotten one thing, that the person I had just exposed was still my brother, the same boy who used to ruffle my hair when I was small, the same person who shared a home with me, who sat at the same dinner table on holidays, who, underneath all the cruelty and the lies, was still someone I had once loved deeply. And grief doesn't care about justice. It doesn't wait for you to finish being angry. It shows up whenever it wants. And it showed up for me on that second night, sitting alone on my couch, staring at my phone, waiting for a call that never came. On the third day, I learned from Emma what had happened at the company. Mr. Hale had handled everything privately. There were no press releases, no public announcements, no dramatic confrontation in a boardroom. That wasn't his style. He was a professional man who valued discretion. But behind closed doors, everything changed. Daniel's role was quietly restructured. His responsibilities were taken away one by one. His sales figures were reviewed. And when the full picture became clear, Mr. Hale made his decision. Daniel was out, not with a bang. Not with a scandal that would make the evening news. Just, quietly, carefully. The way these things usually happen when powerful people don't want the world watching. His reputation wasn't destroyed overnight, but it was damaged deeply, in the circles that mattered to him. In the world he had spent years climbing into, people started to talk. Quietly, but they talked. And Daniel knew exactly why he called me on the fourth night. I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to let it ring. Part of me wanted to block his number entirely and never hear his voice again. But another part of me, a softer part, a part I thought I had buried, that part picked up the phone. He was angry at first. "What did you do, Alice?" His voice was tight, controlled, but underneath it I could hear something cracking, something breaking open that he was desperately trying to hold together. "What did you tell him?" I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit between us, let him feel the weight of it, because I had spent my entire life filling silences for him, filling every uncomfortable moment with a smile or a laugh or a quiet agreement, and I was done doing that. I told him the truth, I said. My voice was steady, calm, quieter than I expected. "That's all I did, Daniel. I told the truth." He went silent, and then something shifted in his voice. The anger didn't disappear completely, but underneath it something else rose to the surface. Something raw, something vulnerable, something I had never heard from him before. "You didn't have to do it like that," he whispered, and those words, those simple broken words, hit me harder than anything else he had ever said to me. Because he wasn't wrong. I didn't have to do it like that. I could have confronted him privately. I could have given him a chance to fix it. I could have chosen the quiet path, the safe path, the path that would have kept the peace. But he had never given me that same chance. Not once, not ever. "You called me the family's failure," I said softly. "In front of everyone. You didn't care how it would feel. You didn't think twice." Another silence. "Longer this time?" "Hey, no," he said, and his voice broke on those two words. I closed my eyes. A tear slipped down my cheek. Not from anger, not from victory, from something much deeper, from the weight of everything we had become. Two siblings who had somehow turned each other into strangers. "I don't hate you, Daniel," I said, and I meant it. Every single word. "But I will never let anyone make me feel small again. Not even you." He didn't say anything after that, and I hung up the phone. I sat there for a long time. The apartment was dark. The only light came from my laptop open on the kitchen table, the cursor blinking on the final page of my manuscript. The book I had been writing for years. The dream I had protected through everything. Through every cruel word. Every dismissive laugh. Every moment someone told me I wasn't enough. I pulled the laptop closer, and I typed the last sentence of my story. Then I leaned back, and I breathed. For the first time in years, I felt free. The book was published the following spring. It didn't become a bestseller overnight, but it found its readers slowly, quietly, the way the truest stories always do. And on the very first page, before the first chapter even begins, there is a single line. A dedication. No name attached. No explanation. Just words. For the girl who finally stopped shrinking. And that is where my story ends. But maybe it is where yours begins. Because if there is someone in your life who has ever made you feel like you don't matter, like you are too small, like your dreams are just noise, I want you to hear me when I say this. They are wrong. The quietest people in the room are not always the weakest. Sometimes they are the ones who are listening, the ones who are watching, the ones who are slowly, carefully building something no one else can see. Daniel thought he knew me. He thought he had already decided who I was. And maybe that was his greatest mistake. Because the moment someone decides you are nothing, they stop paying attention. And the moment they stop paying attention, you are free to become anything you want. If this story made you feel something, if it hit close to home, if you have ever been the quiet one that someone else tried to put down, I want you to do one thing for me. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who is still shrinking. Someone who hasn't yet realized how powerful they truly are. Because trust me, their moment is coming, and when it does, no one will see it coming. Fade to black.